Hello, guys, and welcome back for another episode of the Redline Podcast. It is the number one B2B sales podcast, whether you like it or not. And today I've got Kevin Hopp. He is a legendary phone operator, however you want to put that on. I'll leave it to him to explain. But look, again, if you like the show, if you like what we do, subscribe, like, share it. This is all about value. This is all about people who are coming up in the game, in sales, in marketing, and who don't have the clues. They can't afford training. They can't afford coaching. This is your channel to come and get that. I bring the best professionals in the space to help you guys get a head start. So you can navigate your path, you can navigate your career and get to where you're going 10 times faster than you doing it by yourself. So Kevin, my homie, I'll kick it over to you, man from San Diego, the man with the plan. Let's run it, dude. Who are you and what are you about?
Shane, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. You're my brother from another dial and mother over here across the pond. we could not be further apart. You're in the UK and I'm here in San Diego, California. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Kevin Hopp. I'm an outbound sales process structure and strategy consultant. I run my own business. It's called Hopp Consulting Group. What I do is I almost exclusively work with B2B technology companies, helping them institute what I call a calling culture, develop a way for their reps to feel confident on the phone, have a process, a structure, utilize the best technology. I know how to do it all from A to Z, and that's what I do, man. That's what I'm all about.
And why did you get into this? What was the thing in your life? Let's say high school. We all don't know what we're doing. You go to college, you get a degree in something. What did you go to college for if you did?
Yeah, great question. So I went to, I think it's an important part of my story is I went to junior college first. So that's really,
okay.
It's not super popular here in the States, but it should be because it was awesome. I stayed at home for 2 years. I worked a job, made a ton of money. And then I transferred to university for 2 more years. So I did finish and I got my degree in psychology from UC Santa Barbara here on the West Coast. But, the thing that I have to say about, college and education, when it comes to sales in general, it doesn't matter what you studied. Like psychology, sure, kind of helps understanding people and the way they think and the concepts around it. But sales is a profession of people. You're selling to people. Sales is people to people. So if you can understand people, whether you have an engineering background or a sociology background or psychology or English or whatever you studied, right? Languages. Sales is people selling to people. So when I got out of college, I did not think about sales. I didn't want to get into sales because everyone tells you cold calling is scary and salespeople annoy you and right? That's the vision I had of salespeople. That's just what I thought they were.
Yeah.
But I got an internship at a tech company in Santa Barbara my last semester of college. And at that internship, I was in customer success. So I was on the other side of the house. And I would sit there in my little cubicle thing, and I'd hear noise on the other side of the office, energy. I could hear people buzzing and ringing the gong and the whole thing. They had an SDR pit, and they had AEs, and they had the whole sales team. And I would just find myself going like this. What are they doing over there? What are they doing over there? That's way more I figured out that matched my energy. I had energy and I had enthusiasm and no offense to my customer success brothers, but it's kind of a, it's a lower, slower, a lot of email, a lot of projects and QBR presentation to the customer about what it's not bang, bang, let's go, fun time, feel a pulse going here. So that's why I got into sales. That's kind of what, when that internship ended, I got my first SDR job. Or no, not technically. My first job out of college, my real actual job, I was the first hire at a startup. So I was doing sales.
What was that like?
Yeah, dude, that was wild. To have that be your first job, and it was literally the CEO. Picture this: I'm 24, the CEO is 25. He's a CEO. He got coffee table financing from a local millionaire guy who's like, "Yeah, I'll give you $500,000, go build a company." And his first thing was, he's like, cool, I'm going to hire Kevin. I found him on angellist.com, and I was so excited because it was like, you know, wide open ocean of all the things we can
Yeah.
do and all the things we can't do. And I learned that about myself right away, that I am not one to like sign up for a training school, get a certification, and go do this job. I'm more like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to
Yep.
learn by
Mm-hmm.
doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first job. And then when I got fired from that job, which is important part of my story, if we're going to talk about my story, is I get fired a lot. I got
Yep.
fired a lot. And those are all important learning lessons. But when I got fired from that job, I was
Mm-hmm.
talking with mentors in my life, and they said, hey, if you're not scared of sales, you're naturally going to make a lot more money in sales than you will at any of these other things. It's a profession that you can take
Very
your
true.
expertise from and go do other things with. So that's when I got my first SDR job. Was my second job out of college. The year was 2015.
Wow. Startup life is not a joke, and I'll tell you, even from my experience, I wouldn't do it again. I would not start a business again, if I'm completely honest. I'd buy a business and keep running it, but I would
Yeah.
never start up a business again. It's fun, but once you do it, there comes a time when you understand how to connect the dots and how to make money in easier ways rather than banging your head against the wall. One thing that you talk about a lot, Kevin, and I think is really important, is the words calling culture. And I'll ask you why in a second. The businesses I've always been part of have always been heavily phone related, always me calling, and that's the only skill I ever developed. I was never able to develop a marketing skill, any digital skills. I had to learn by doing, as you say,
Yeah.
right? And but the one thing that I always saw, even in my second job, I was always a stand-up pitcher. I always stood up and pitched. I thought it was fun. I thought it made a difference. And then the last job before I became ran my own business, it was the same. And my bosses would ask me, "Can you please keep standing up because you give the energy of the floor, and we want people to do that." And you're loud, and it looks like you're having fun. Everybody else are monotone. So why did you come up with calling culture as that word, and what does it really mean to you and your customers?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking. If you go to my LinkedIn, and all you listening should go to my LinkedIn, look up Kevin Hopp. I think I'm the only one. You'll see my
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn profile picture is a picture of me in the SDR pit in 2015, standing up, making cold calls. That's my profile picture, right? I realized when I looked back at kind of what I've been doing in consulting, helping people with process structure and strategy around cold calling and bringing in tech platforms and helping their data process and all that. The biggest impact that I was actually making in these organizations was I was turning these SDRs into little calling, calling machines, and they
Mm-hmm.
loved it and they got excited for it. And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, "Let's go, let's turn it on, let's turn on the dial, let's rip it, let's go."
Mm-hmm.
Had that
Mm-hmm.
enthusiasm, and I thought back to I had a transformational cardinal experience, cornerstone experience, whatever you want to call it, when I was an SDR. And the company, the Series A tech startup that I worked for at the time, they hired a consultant to come in, and he was something else. Like, he changed my life. He really changed my life. He was old school East Coast. So you know what he did, Shane? He walked into our office and said, "Nah, fuck this. You're not sitting in little cubicles. We're putting everybody in two straight lines, and everyone's gonna stand up.
Yep.
We're getting you
Yep.
standing desks. We're not having chairs. If I see you sitting down, you're fired." Like, aggressive, aggressive.
That's good. I
So
love that shit.
the the other thing that he said was 20 connects or a pink slip. So you had to call until you had 20 live conversations that day, or you're fired. And by the way, the first person that got to 20 connects, he taped $100 bill to the wall. First person to get to 20 connects gets the $100 bill. Just taking that effort and activity levels through the roof, right? And
Wow.
he was so old school that he had us doing this all by hand, like punching 10 digits at a time on the phone, on a
Yep.
handset phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had headsets,
Yep.
thankfully, but we were just going boop,
Mm-hmm.
boop, 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 you know, like ripping that way. I look back on that and I say, he was so wrong. Like that was so not the way to do it. Like that was so dumb to think that like punching 10 digits at a time and like you have to stand up all day and da, da, da. Like that that company went under. Like that company itself sold in a fire sale. You can look it up, and if you want to go look at what company I'm talking about, it's on my LinkedIn. Like that company like blew up in a bad way because
Oh wow.
this was a very, very old school methodology that probably worked for slinging penny stocks, but didn't work for selling enterprise
Yep.
technology. So I
Very true.
I sell myself as the evolution of that concept, right? And if you think about it,
That's very good.
who hires me? It's mostly, I'll tell you, 95% of the people I've worked with are sales leaders over the age of 45, under the age of 65. Because they were SDRs back when that was the only way to do it, right? And they knew that I got to pound these digits. I know I got to rip the phones. But now it's 2023. You're not going to take somebody from Gen Z and tell them to stand up for 8 hours a day at their home office and rip phones. You can give them a process structure and, most importantly, technology where they press go,
Mm-hmm.
they wait, and sure, they could stand up. But you only need 2 hours or an hour and a half a day to have 8 to 10 to 15 live conversations with process, strategy, and technology. So that's what I do now is I take this like really old school boiler room, like let's pound phones,
Mm-hmm.
and I make it millennial and Gen Z friendly. That's what I do for a living.
That is an awesome way to put it, honestly. I come from the same culture. My business partner came from the same culture. My inspiration always came from Boiler Room and Wolf of Wall Street. And as you were saying it, like, it's very funny how people think. Because as you were saying, he made you stand up and pitch. Like, really and truly, I'm for that guy. I love that shit because it does get people going. And I think I've been around too many people that are pussies and
Sure.
they don't want to do it, right? They don't want to do it. And sometimes you need that bit of force. So, yes, I agree with his methodology. I agree it's outdated. And the flavor you're putting on it and the way you put it, I bring the old school mentality and I add my flavor. I salt and pepper it with a bit of Kevin Hopp and I make it new. And that is, dude, that's dope. That is, more people need to hear that kind of stuff because we are so shifted towards selling is shit, tacky. People undermine sellers,
Yeah,
but they don't know that there are elite sellers that do incredible things. So, mate, hats off to you for that. Now, the big juicy parts are what we're going to discuss over probably the next 20 to 30 minutes. And they're to do with failures and learnings. All right.
for sure.
And my biggest term that I use in coaching and business and running operations is accelerated learning through failure. And I have some massive failures. So, what I'd like to ask you is what is your biggest failure in life? The most profound failure that had the biggest impact in helping you shape your future?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, the the biggest
You can think about
failure.
it.
No, I think. Well, I like you. I'm a guy who has failed a lot to figure out what he wants, and it's because people like you and me need to like experience it firsthand and like kind of that
Yes,
stubborn
exactly.
mentality of I'm going to figure this out. No, it didn't work out. So
Exactly.
let's put it this way: that job, that SDR job that I was just talking about, where it changed my life and I loved it and I leaned into it and I was all about calling culture and I was like number one from activity, number one for pipeline generated. I was killing it. I got fired.
Mm-hmm.
I got fired from that job.
That's
So
crazy.
when
Why?
I got
So just on that, why?
yeah. So when I got fired, I was wearing the company T-shirt that day. You know, like had the company stickers all over my phone. Like I was a team player. But what I learned was a really important lesson, which is
Okay.
even if you perform and you're on the leaderboard, what people say about you when you're not there, about your effort, your attitude, your enthusiasm, um, is really important. So I got fired at that job for undermining the leadership. I told the rest of the team that I didn't believe in the direction the leadership was taking our sales organization. I told them, I said, look, I said,
Wow.
guys, this is not going to fucking work. And these are conversations that I had at, happy hour and other places. Right.
Yeah.
But when I started saying, I don't believe in the leadership, that got back to leadership. And
Oh
they,
man.
they don't look at the squeaky wheel and say it needs the grease. We need to talk to Kevin. They look at Kevin and say, you are undermining what we're trying to do here. You're fired. Like, tough lesson to learn. Really tough lesson to learn. So that's
Wow,
probably the
dude.
biggest failure. And it took me a while to figure out that's exactly why I got fired, because they didn't say it was for performance. I was performing. I was doing
Mm.
great. I was a top performer. It wasn't for
Mm.
performance. It was a cultural fit, was what they said. And I wasn't fired for cause, right? Let's be clear. I didn't get it wasn't a court case or anything, but I just got terminated. At startups, they terminate people left, right, and sideways. And I was the first of many that got fired there. But that taught me a really important lesson about how to work in an operational structure where you're not in charge, and the importance of optics and the importance of like what people think of you. It does, like, your numbers on a spreadsheet, sure, like in terms of production and value and pipeline,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
culture is important, right? And if you have
Man, you're right.
if you have a rotten egg in the bunch, right? Someone who's like good, but they're tearing other people, they're bringing people's attitude down. That's
Mm-hmm.
toxic. That's toxic. You can't have that. So I learned that the hard way.
Mate, I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty of it too. And I think, like, that, honestly, this podcast is such a massive learning for me because you've just taught me a lesson now. I've always thought the one thing I always said to anybody I worked with, trained, or worked for, as long as I hit my numbers, as long as I do what I'm supposed to do, leave me alone, right? And I did the same thing. I undermined my head of marketing, who was before I started my business. I undermined my head of marketing. She was delivering on a webinar that I had tried 2 years to win this client. 2 years, and I won the client, and the delivery was ass. He called me and he said, "Shane, you're a fucking liar." And I was like, "What? Why?" He said, "I found out that the people that are registering for the webinar are not even those people. You're having people in India do it." I said, "No, I didn't know that. Like, I genuinely didn't know that." And I went and asked my marketing director, and she said, "As long as we hit the contractual number, it's fine. You shouldn't worry about who it is." I said, you don't know what you're doing. You're an
Yeah.
idiot." And then I got the big back from them, and then I quit. But I always thought I was untouchable if my numbers were good, and I completely missed that part. And it's happened just recently that, yeah, the perception is huge, because if they don't, as much as your numbers being good, if they don't like what you are doing within that organization, you're toast. So, all right, now with that failure, it was a profound failure. It led to a number of different learnings that you experienced. Now, from that failure, what is the biggest learning experience you've ever had, and that's helped you become the powerhouse you are today? Where did that learning come from, and what was it?
So if you want to know like what I learned that enabled me to have the success I'm having today, it really comes down
Yep.
to understanding how people, like, what people are willing to pay for, right? You think that
Okay.
people are willing to like pay to solve problems, yes. People are willing to pay for shiny objects they kind of like, yes. But when I figured out that people will pay for someone who is confident and says, I can do this, I bet in the farm that I will do this for you, that's when my career changed.
Mm-hmm.
My career changed overnight. That's when I stopped working for companies and I started working for myself, because I figured out, okay, all I need to do is be able to say, you have to call your shot, right? People come to me all the time.
Yeah.
I have a call actually tomorrow afternoon with a guy, young gun, who's like really good at his tech sales job, but he's like, Kevin, I want to be independent like you. And I'm going to tell him, he can listen to this podcast too, that if you want to be independent, you want to make your own money, you want to live on your terms, because I live on my terms, you have to
Mm-hmm.
be super confident and be able to call your shot and execute on things. Talk is
Yes.
cheap. Talk is
I
so
love
cheap.
that. I
Like
love that. Yep.
execution, making shit happen If you
Happen.
say, hey, I can take your process from A to B to Z and here will be the outcome, and then you go do it, all you need to do is do it a few times and get those people to give you a testimonial. And now all of a sudden you got street cred. And that's where I'm at. I've got lots of testimonials. I got videos. I got written. I got all that. So now when the client comes to, they've never heard of me and I get introduced to them or I cold call them. Like, yeah, that's right. I do cold call still. Like when I talk to a client
Mm-hmm.
for the first time, they say, okay. And like, have you done this before? And I'm like, check out this list of testimonials. This is what I fucking do. And that confidence is what people pay me thousands of dollars a month for very, very small pieces of my time. So when I figured that out, Shane, that changed the fucking game. That changed it all.
Mate, you hit the nail on the head. Like execution for me has been the biggest thing, and Jake Dunlap actually. I didn't know how to really explain it, but the way I looked at it is, I've got this idea, which is the startup idea. My startup idea is an army tank, a fully fueled arsenal tank that weighs a couple of 100 tons, and my job is to push it. And all I need to do is push one, whatever it's called, rib or whatever, one line, and the momentum will eventually start building. And then he told me about Gino Wickman and traction and how things start to move. And I struggled with my business partner about this so much because it was always like, it has to be perfect. It has to be perfect. It has to be perfect. I said, just shut the fuck up and let's do it. And we'll figure it out. We're going to make mistakes and then we'll do it. What do you tell me what you think when you hear imperfect action beats perfect inaction every time?
Well, yeah, I've actually been studying Stoicism a lot recently, right?
Me too, yeah.
And one of the things that the Stoics always say, I think it's Marcus Aurelius, is that
Yeah, Marcus Aurelius.
the number one crime is that you can do to yourself is to start tomorrow. It's like the number one like problem, right? So whenever I'm faced with like, I've done this time and time again in my career. Whenever I'm faced with this thing where I'm like, I want to change, I want to grow, I want to learn something, I want to do
Mm-hmm.
something different, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
moment in time where you're like, I could invest into this training course, I could invest into this mastermind group, I could invest into starting a podcast. Well, that's an expense. That's going to cost money. That's money I could use to feed
Of
my
course.
family. That's money I always think, but what if I don't? Right? Like I got to action over all else, right? And
Mm-hmm.
this is
Mm-hmm.
actually really, it needs to be said because there are people listening to this right now that are working their job and they're chugging along
Mm-hmm.
and they're thinking, I need a paycheck. I need my salary. I need this,
Yeah.
lifeline to support me. You
Yeah.
will be exactly there, treading water, doing what you're doing, unless you take action, right? Action is
Yep.
what drives change, and change is what humans actually really do appreciate. Like your mind wants to grow, you want to do better, and if you don't take that next step and start living for today and not tomorrow, that's when you're in real trouble, right? And it doesn't have to be perfect. Like your quote is there is about like, does it have to be perfect? The fuck no. Like nothing's perfect, right? That's another stoic thing, which is like you're never going to be perfect. You're not
Yep.
here for the perfect outcome. You're here to try and build the perfect process. If you try to build a perfect process for how you live your life, over time, you're going to make a lot of progress.
Mate, you're like my white twin.
There we go.
So another thing that I mentioned at the beginning, right? I just wish I had these tools. I wish I had people like yourself that I knew of your profile 5 years ago. I wish I knew certain things about cold calling. I wish I knew instead of saying, thinking, oh my God, is he going to be able to afford this? The webinar's 10,500. Fuck it. My discount's 5.5. Let me just give it to him for 5.5 because he'll probably buy it on price. How much budget do you have? Like simple things like that. How much are you able to spend? Or what did you think this would cost? That changed everything when I started my business because instead of getting small price ticket services, we went up to $128,000 contracts. We were hitting 63K. Like we did bits, and I'm really, really proud of that. And I have a few messages that I would go back in time and I would tell 18-year-old self what to do. So this next question is a bit of a juicy one, right? You're going to go back to your 18-year-old self. You're going to meet him wherever you used to chill. And you're going to sit in front of him and say, hey, look, I'm you in 20 years. I've got the roadmap. This is literally like Back to the Future, and I have that book. This is the one thing you have to do to make sure you're successful in half the time. Tell him
Yeah.
what you're going to tell me what you're going to tell him.
I'm going to lead with the joke, and then I'll follow with the real answer. You ready for the joke?
Yeah.
It's 2 words. 2 words. Buy Bitcoin. Yeah, dude. If I'm sitting there and it's 2009 when I turned 18, I'd say buy Bitcoin. You're gonna see something about it on the internet in like 2 years and put $10,000 on Bitcoin. I'd be retired. Shit, I'd be a billionaire, bro. I'd be wealthy. And I remember hearing about Bitcoin back in the day and being like, oh, it's stupid internet money.
Yeah, I remember.
Dude. And then I bought the dip in 2018. I bought like $1,000 of the Bitcoin in the dip, and it's finally kind of getting up there. But all right. Well, what I would really say to my 18-year-old self, I think I think that I put a lot of pressure on myself coming out of adolescence to have a plan. And I felt a lot of pressure, and it wasn't really from my parents. Like, my parents did a great job. They paid for my school. So fortunate. I know I'm very privileged. They paid for college for me. And I felt a lot of internal pressure to go be successful and to go figure it out. And I think that internal pressure led to a lack of patience, which led to me just being a aggressive person in the office. And that's how I got fired from my first 2 jobs, was having this like fiery attitude all the time because I wanted more. I wanted to go faster. I wanted to, like, if I could just go back to my 18-year-old self and say like, hey man, like, have patience with the process. I think that would be the number one thing that would make my journey to get to where I am today, or I might be further than I am today at 31. Like, it would just make it better, man. Like, I had years of anxiety. I had years of like, all sorts of strife, and like, whether it's like, I've my whole life I've always had a thing for like dark-haired women. Ended up marrying like redhead.
Yeah.
Like, I had this vision. You have this vision of like what you want for yourself, and like my 5'9", dark-haired, dark-featured wife, and now I married like a small, redheaded girl, and it's because but I had a lot of anxiety about it. It all changes. And I thought that I would be in, I never really had a dream of what career I'd have, but I didn't think I'd be in sales, right? And I didn't have the patience and the wherewithal to look into it and to talk to people who are in sales. And part of that comes from the fact that my dad's an engineer, and like my uncle's a CPA. So I didn't have any salespeople around me to like say, hey, dude, sales is legit. You should really check it out. Yeah, man, patience with the process. I was in a hurry to get nowhere fast, and that probably caused me way more anxiety and strife than it needed to.
Mate, it's very, very, very inspiring, number one, and satisfying to hear that I'm not the only one who was thinking like that, and that's the truth. I was always, again, in a rush. I think my dad said, if you get accepted to Harvard, I'll get you a Porsche. And I tried for like a week and then gave up. I couldn't do it. I hated school. But as we wrap up the show, I think we've touched on a lot of important things. Another thing I want my audience and your listeners that watch this to take advantage of is growth hacks that work today.
Yeah.
So one of my most recent growth hacks is I took on Connect and Sell and purged the shit out of data. I wondered, why am I using so much data and getting so little connects? Then I understood it's more on the ICP. Then I understood it's more on verification, then on validation, then on slicing lists. And then I got to a point where I didn't need so much power because the quality of my data had increased so much so that I get a connect 33, one of every three calls, I'm connecting with somebody.
That's
And
awesome.
in terms of speed to build pipeline, which I'm moving away from very, very quickly, that's one of them. And you touched on something. I think you had a guest the other day and you said, after 18 years, I think you'd be done with cold calling by now. And that's the same thing with me. I love that.
Yeah.
So I'm moving into a place where Redline, the content, the speakers are dope, the topics are dope, getting sponsorship here, and then I've just signed a contract with an investment management firm that I'm going to be working with. That is funding startups and doing a whole bunch of things. That's going to be interesting. But Kevin, what's a growth hack? After somebody listens to this, they can go on the phone or on their PC on LinkedIn and go do something right now that will change, not forever, maybe the next few weeks. And then when they come again, they can reach out to you and say, how do I follow through with this? What is that growth hack? What is that thing that you can help somebody change the way they work?
Yeah, so I mean, this is something that is very familiar to you and I because we're calling nerds. But every time that I introduce the concept to people who are trying to make calls and say things like, "I make like 25 calls a day, and it's tough," and, which is like 90% of the market, Shane. Most
Yeah,
people
it is.
are are
It
hitting
is.
a really low KPI for calls, and they're not having a good time with it. Like the number one thing that seems super intuitive to us, but this will help if you turn around and go do this tomorrow. You do not need to do research before you cold call. All right, like that's
Very
let's
true.
take that knowledge and like whatever your sales manager told you of like knowing what school they went to and where they live and what they ate for breakfast
God.
yesterday. Throw that out the
Yeah.
window. You do not need to do research before you cold call. What you do need to know and what you should do, and here's the hack, is you need to group people that you're going to call in a row, in a list, like a machine gun. You need to
Yep.
group them by what matters to them. Because guess what? If you take everyone in your
That's
ICP,
different.
what matters to you is if they buy your shit. That's all you care about. You're like, oh, it's the same. I'll just pitch
Yep.
my shit to everybody. No. Group them together, most likely by job title or by job division, right? Like all the support people
Mm.
together, all the success people together, all the technical people together. But the value of what you have to sell, what you have to talk about is different to them. Group people by what is important to them and then talk about that in your pitch. You don't need to know where they went to school. You don't need to know how long they've been in their role. You don't need to know any of that shit. You get the conversation started and you only talk about business problems and valuable solutions to them in the context of what they do. So that's like the number one hack that anyone can go do. It just takes effort. It takes time. Take a little bit of
Mate,
time and do it.
that is spot on. And if you don't know how to do that, contact Kevin
That's right.
directly. Listen, I know a lot of good people in this space, and there's one person you have never, ever, ever dropped off. You've never changed in terms of a bad way. You've always represented it. So, where do people come to find you, Kevin? They want to know how to wrap that up. They want to know how to use your tips. They
For
want to
sure.
learn from you. How do they find you?
For sure. So you can go to LinkedIn, of course, Kevin Hopp on LinkedIn, but I also have a link tree thing that's called it's
Mm-hmm.
solo.to/hop. And I'll send it to you, Shane. You can put it in the show notes.
Yep. Yep.
Go there to find my podcast. You'd also find I'll put the link to this podcast. I'll put all sorts of stuff in there. You can
Mm-hmm.
also find free trial links for data providers and dialing technology in there that are exclusive that are offered to my followers and listeners and people. So solo.to/hop. Go check
Mm-hmm.
out my stuff and reach out to me if you want to chat process, structure, strategy. I'm always available.
Awesome. Kevin, you are a legend. Thank you very much. I'm going to wrap it up. Stay on for like 2 minutes. Just got to do some uploading. But guys, like, share. What's the other one? Subscribe. Join us
Yeah.
on LinkedIn and keep watching it because we're coming with the heat. Thank you again, and I'll see you next week.